In the heart of the kingdom of Umuoma, where the land was as fertile as the love the people had for their rulers, King Efetobor and Queen Ejiro had longed for a child for many years. Their palace, nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, was a place of happiness, but there was an emptiness that not even the grandeur of their reign could fill. The people of Umuoma often whispered prayers on behalf of their rulers, hoping the gods would bless them with an heir. The king and queen had visited every shrine in the land, offered countless sacrifices, and consulted with the most revered priests and priestesses. They had journeyed to the sacred waters of the Oto River, where Queen Ejiro had bathed at dawn, as the oldest tradition prescribed for a woman seeking fertility. The couple's devotion to each other and their desire for a child was known throughout the kingdom. Then, when they had almost given up hope, Queen Ejiro found herself with child. The news spread through Umuoma like wildfire. The people celebrated in the streets, and the palace gates were flooded with well-wishers, bringing gifts and blessings. It was said that the stars themselves aligned on the night Amara was born, shining brighter than ever before, as if the heavens rejoiced with the people. Amara's birth was a moment of pure joy. The infant princess had a head of thick black hair and eyes that sparkled like the Ota River under the midday sun. The queen held her daughter close, tears of happiness streaming down her face as King Efetobor stood by her side, his chest swelling with pride. The palace, usually a place of calm and order, buzzed with the energy of celebration. The king declared a week of festivities throughout the kingdom. People danced in the streets, and the sound of drums and flutes filled the air. Feasts were held in every village, and the palace grounds were transformed into a place of revelry, with colorful tents and lanterns. The finest dancers, drummers, and entertainers were summoned from every corner of the kingdom to perform in honor of the newborn princess. It was during these celebrations, amidst the laughter and music, that a strange event occurred. An old woman, dressed in tattered clothes, her face obscured by a weathered hood, appeared at the palace gates. Her arrival was so quiet, so unassuming, that the guards almost didn't notice her. But there was something about her presence that compelled them to allow her through. She walked with a deliberate pace, her cane tapping rhythmically on the cobblestones. The old woman made her way to the great hall, where the king and queen sat, surrounded by their advisors and noblemen. She approached the throne, her steps slow but purposeful. The revelry quieted as she stood before the royal couple, her figure small and frail compared to the grandeur around her. "Who are you, old woman, and what brings you to our celebration?" King Efetobor asked, his voice filled with curiosity rather than anger. The old woman lifted her head, revealing a face lined with deep wrinkles, her eyes sharp and gleaming with an otherworldly light. "I am a messenger, Your Majesty," she said, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "I come with a warning, not from me, but from the ancestors." The air in the hall grew tense as everyone leaned in, drawn by the gravity in her voice. The queen instinctively clutched Amara closer to her chest, sensing the weight of the words to come. "This child," the old woman continued, her gaze fixed on the princess, "though she is born of royal blood and blessed with beauty, carries with her a curse that will manifest as she grows into womanhood. It will drive all men away from her, and she will remain unmarried unless true love that sees beyond the physical, finds her. Only such love can break the curse." The queen's face paled, and a hush fell over the hall. The joyful atmosphere was instantly replaced by a cold, foreboding silence. The king, trying to maintain his composure, stood up. "These are dark words to speak on a day of celebration," he said, his voice firm but shaken. "My daughter is blessed, not cursed. Take your ominous predictions elsewhere." But the old woman did not waver. "My words are not meant to bring despair, but to prepare you, Your Majesty. The curse is real, and it will come to pass. Protect your daughter, for the road ahead will be difficult." With that, she turned and left, her figure soon lost in the shadows of the palace corridors. The people in the hall remained silent, the joy of the celebration now tainted by the old woman's warning. The king tried to dismiss her words as the ravings of a madwoman, but the queen could not shake the fear that gripped her heart. She held Amara closer, whispering prayers for her daughter's safety. Outside, the celebrations continued, but within the palace walls, a sense of unease lingered. The old woman's words echoed in the queen's mind, even as she tried to push them away. She knew that the curse, if it were real, would bring untold sorrow to their family and the kingdom. Amara, blissfully unaware of the dark prophecy, gurgled happily in her mother's arms, her tiny fingers grasping at the queen's necklace. The queen smiled down at her, forcing herself to focus on the present, on the joy of holding her daughter. She told herself that they would overcome whatever challenges lay ahead, that their love for Amara would be enough to protect her from any curse. But deep down, a seed of fear had been planted, and it would grow with each passing year until the day the curse finally revealed itself. Years passed, and Princess Amara grew into a lively and curious young girl. The kingdom of Umuoma continued to thrive under King Efetobor's rule, and the people adored their princess, who was known for her kindness and wisdom even at a young age. The dark prophecy spoken at her birth was all but forgotten, buried under the daily joys of life in the palace. Amara spent her days exploring the palace gardens, where the most exotic flowers bloomed and butterflies danced in the warm breeze. She loved to sit by the lily pond, watching the fish swim through the water. The palace staff adored her, and she was never without a companion, be it a maid, a guard, or one of the many tutors who came to teach her. Queen Ejiro, though always watchful, began to relax as the years went by. Amara showed no signs of the curse, and the queen allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the old woman's words were nothing more than superstition. Amara was the light of the palace, and her laughter echoed through the halls, bringing joy to all who heard it. But as Amara approached her 12th birthday, subtle changes began to occur. The first to notice were her maids, who had always taken pride in keeping the princess clean and well-groomed. Despite their best efforts, they began to notice a faint, unusual odor that seemed to cling to her, no matter how often she bathed or how much perfume was used. The maids whispered among themselves, worried that the princess might be sick, but they were too scared to speak to the queen about it. The scent was faint at first, just a slight undercurrent that could be masked with fragrant oils. But as Amara grew older, the smell became more pronounced. It wasn't a bad smell per se, but it was strong, persistent, and unlike anything the palace staff had encountered before. Some described it as earthy and spicy. Others said it was a bit bitter, but nobody could figure out what it was. Amara herself began to notice it, but she didn't think much of it at first. She assumed it was simply because she played outdoors a lot or spent time with the palace animals. She continued with her lessons, her play, and her duties, unaware of the growing concern among the palace staff. As the months passed, the scent grew stronger, and it became harder to ignore. The maids would discreetly open windows and doors whenever Amara entered a room, hoping to air it out. They tried every remedy they knew, bathing her in scented oils, scrubbing her skin with fragrant herbs, burning incense in her chambers. But nothing worked. The scent clung to her like a second skin, and the maids began to dread attending to the princess. Rumors began to circulate among the servants. Some whispered that the princess was cursed, recalling the old woman's warning from years ago. Others insisted it was just a phase, something she would grow out of. But as the scent grew stronger, so did the whispers, and soon, even the queen could not ignore it. Queen Ejiro called for the royal physician, Idemudia, who had served the palace for many years. He was a man of science, respected for his knowledge of medicine and the human body. The queen hoped that he would find a rational explanation for the strange odor that surrounded her daughter. Idemudia examined Amara thoroughly, checking for any signs of illness or infection. He listened to her heartbeat, checked her pulse, and inspected her skin for any rashes or discoloration. But Amara was in perfect health, with no sign of any ailment that could explain the odor. "Your Majesty," Idemudia said, his voice filled with uncertainty, "I can find no physical cause for the scent. The princess is in good health, and there is nothing wrong with her body that would produce such an odor. It is possible that this is a temporary condition, one that will pass with time." The queen, though relieved that her daughter was healthy, was not satisfied with the physician's explanation. But what if it does not pass? What if this is something more than a physical ailment, something supernatural? Idemudia hesitated, knowing that the queen's fears were rooted in the prophecy spoken at Amara's birth. "It is not my place to speak of curses, Your Majesty, but if you are concerned, it may be wise to seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor or a priestess." The queen nodded, her mind racing with worry. "Thank you, Idemudia. You may go." As the physician left, Queen Ejiro sat in silence, her heart heavy with fear. The scent was not just a physical anomaly. It was a manifestation of the curse she had hoped to avoid. The old woman's words echoed in her mind, and she knew that they could no longer ignore the prophecy. She called for the king, who had been busy with affairs of state. When he arrived, the queen told him of the growing scent and her fears that the curse was beginning to take hold. King Efetobor listened, his face darkening with concern. "We must not let this curse control our daughter's life," he said firmly. "We will find a way to break it, or at least manage it. Amara is strong, and we will not let this scent define her." The queen agreed, but worry still clouded her mind. "But how do we fight something that is not of this world? We have tried everything to mask the scent, but it only grows stronger. The people are beginning to talk, Efetobor. They are beginning to remember the prophecy." The king sighed, rubbing his temples as he tried to think. "We will bring in the finest healers, the most powerful spiritualists, anyone who can help. But we must be discreet. We cannot let the people know the full extent of this curse, or they will lose faith in our ability to lead." The queen agreed, and so began the secretive search for a solution to Amara's curse. Over the next few months, the palace became a place of quiet desperation. Healers, priests, and wise women were brought in under the cover of night, each one promising a cure, but none succeeding. They burned herbs, recited incantations, and performed rituals, but the scent remained, growing stronger with each passing day. Amara, though she was not told the full extent of her condition, began to sense that something was wrong. She noticed the way people avoided her, how they would cut their conversations short when she approached, how the palace corridors seemed emptier whenever she walked through them. She could see the worry etched on her mother's face and the tension in her father's voice. One day, as she wandered through the palace gardens, Amara came across a group of servants gathered under a large baobab tree. They were talking in hushed tones, their faces serious, and they didn't see her approach. "I heard that the princess's scent is getting worse," one of the maids whispered. "They say it's a curse, that no amount of bathing or perfume can get rid of it." "Of course it's a curse," another servant replied. "Remember the old woman who came when she was born? She warned the king and queen that this would happen. They should have listened to her." Amara's heart sank as she listened to their words. She had always suspected that something was wrong, but to hear it confirmed by the servants was a blow she was not prepared for. She turned and fled the garden, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She ran to her chambers, where she locked the door and collapsed onto her bed, tears streaming down her face. She could not escape the scent that clung to her, nor could she escape the knowledge that it was a curse that would drive everyone away from her. That night, as she lay awake in the dark, Amara vowed to find a way to break the curse. She would not let it control her life, nor would she let it take away her chance at happiness. But deep down, she knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, and she would need strength she had never known to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. As the scent grew stronger, the king and queen realized they could no longer keep Amara's condition a secret. The whispers within the palace walls had begun to spread beyond, reaching the ears of the villagers and even neighboring kingdoms. The people of Umuoma, who had once celebrated the birth of their princess with such joy, now spoke of her with a mixture of pity and fear. The royal couple knew that they had to act quickly if they were to protect their daughter and secure the future of the kingdom. They decided to widen their search for a cure, sending word to every corner of the land, promising a reward to anyone who could help. The promise of wealth and power lured many to the palace, each one hoping to be the one to break the curse. The first to arrive were the healers, men and women, who claimed to have knowledge of ancient remedies and potions. They came with sacks of herbs, jars of oils, and strange instruments that clinked and clattered as they walked. The king and queen watched as the healers mixed their concoctions, their hopes rising with each new promise. But despite their efforts, the scent remained. The potions, though potent, only masked the smell for a few hours, and the herbs did little to ease the discomfort Amara felt. The healers, once so confident in their abilities, left the palace with heavy hearts, knowing they had failed. Next came the spiritualists, men and women who claimed to have the power to commune with the spirits and ancestors. They arrived dressed in flowing robes, their eyes bright with the fire of their beliefs. They performed rituals in the palace courtyard, burning incense and chanting incantations, their voices rising and falling in rhythmic patterns. The people of Umuoma gathered outside the palace walls, watching with a mixture of hope and skepticism as the spiritualists worked. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, and the ground trembled beneath their feet as the spiritualists called upon the spirits to break the curse. But despite their fervent prayers and rituals, the curse remained. The scent continued to cling to Amara, growing stronger with each passing day. The spiritualists, too, left the palace in defeat, their confidence shattered. As the days turned into weeks and then months, the palace became a place of quiet despair. The king and queen, once so full of hope, began to lose faith that the curse could be broken. They watched as their daughter grew more isolated, her once bright spirit dimming with each new failure. Amara too felt the weight of the curse bearing down on her. She could no longer deny that it was real, that it was something beyond her control. She watched as the people she loved pulled away from her, unable to bear the scent that surrounded her. Even her parents, though they tried to hide it, found it difficult to be near her for long. The palace, once filled with laughter and music, became a place of shadows and silence. The servants, who had once doted on the princess, now avoided her, their faces pale with fear and pity. The corridors, once bustling with activity, were now empty, the only sound the echo of Amara's footsteps as she wandered through them. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, casting the palace in a golden glow, Amara sat alone in her chambers, staring out at the village below. The scent of the curse hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the burden she carried. She could see the villagers going about their daily lives, laughing, talking, and living the lives she longed to have. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought of the future that awaited her, a future of loneliness and despair. She would never know the joy of love, never feel the warmth of her husband's embrace, never have children of her own. The curse would keep her isolated, locked away in the palace, while the world moved on without her. She thought of the old woman who had warned her parents of the curse, the woman whose words had been dismissed as superstition. How different her life might have been if the curse had never been spoken, if she had been born free of this burden. But there was no use in wishing for what could not be changed. The curse was real, and she had to find a way to live with it. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she heard a soft knock on her door. Wiping her tears, she called out, "Who is it?" The door creaked open, and her mother, Queen Ejiro, stepped inside. The queen's face was etched with worry, her eyes tired from sleepless nights. She approached Amara slowly, as if unsure of what to say. "Amara, my dear," the queen began, her voice gentle. "How are you feeling?" Amara forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, mother, just thinking." The queen sat down beside her daughter, her heart aching at the sight of Amara's sadness. "I know this has been difficult for you," she said, reaching out to stroke Amara's hair. "But we will find a way to break this curse. We will not give up." Amara looked at her mother, her eyes filled with despair. "But what if we can't, mother? What if this is my fate, to be alone forever?" The queen's heart broke at the hopelessness in her daughter's voice. She wished she could take away the pain, to reassure Amara that everything would be all right. But she knew that words alone would not be enough. "Amara," she said softly, "I believe that there is someone out there who will see beyond the curse, who will love you for who you are, not what this curse has made you. We just have to find them." Amara shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But who would want to be with someone like me? No one can even stand to be near me, mother. How can I believe that someone will love me?" The queen pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her close as she whispered words of comfort. "You are not defined by this curse, Amara. You are strong, kind, and beautiful. The right person will see that. They will see the true you." Amara clung to her mother, her tears soaking into the queen's gown. She wanted to believe her mother's words, to have hope that her life could still be full of love and happiness. But the weight of the curse was heavy, and the road ahead seemed impossibly long. That night, as Amara lay in bed, she thought about her mother's words. She knew that she had to keep fighting, to keep hoping that there was a way to break the curse. But deep down, she feared that her mother's hope was in vain, that she was destined to remain alone, trapped in a life defined by the curse. In a small village on the outskirts of Umuoma, life went on as it always had. The villagers were simple people, farmers and craftsmen who worked hard and lived modestly. They had heard the rumors of the cursed princess, but such tales felt distant, like something out of a story rather than real life. Among the villagers was a man named Odibo, a humble herbalist known for his gentle nature and deep knowledge of plants and their healing properties. Odibo was not wealthy, nor was he particularly ambitious. He lived alone in a small, thatched-roof cottage at the edge of the village, surrounded by a garden that overflowed with herbs, flowers, and medicinal plants. Odibo's days were spent tending to his garden, preparing remedies for the villagers and helping those in need. He was a man of few words, content with his solitude and the simple life he had built for himself. He had never sought wealth or power, and he had no desire to leave the quiet comfort of his village. But one day, as Odibo was gathering herbs in the forest, he overheard a group of travelers speaking of the cursed princess. They spoke of the scent that clung to her, the healers and spiritualists who had failed to break the curse, and the despair that had fallen over the palace. Odibo listened quietly, his heart filled with compassion for the princess. He had never met her, but he knew what it was like to be different, to be set apart from others. He thought of the remedies he had crafted over the years, the plants he had studied, and he wondered if there was something he could do to help. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Odibo sat in his garden, deep in thought. He had never been to the palace, never even seen the king or queen. He was just a simple herbalist, a man who lived his life quietly and without fanfare. But something in his heart told him that he could not ignore the plight of the princess. He decided that he would go to the palace, not to seek wealth or power, but to offer his help. He knew that the curse might be beyond his ability to break, but he could at least try to ease the princess's suffering. It was a decision that filled him with both resolve and a touch of apprehension. The next morning, Odibo gathered his most potent herbs and remedies, placing them carefully in a worn leather satchel. He set off on foot, his journey taking him through forests and across fields, until the grand silhouette of the palace came into view. As he approached the palace gates, Odibo could feel the weight of the task ahead of him. The guards, seeing his humble appearance and simple clothing, were skeptical. But there was something in Odibo's eyes, a quiet determination that convinced them to let him pass. He was led through the grand halls of the palace, the walls adorned with tapestries and portraits of past rulers. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the echoes of his footsteps bounced off the marble floors. Odibo couldn't help but feel out of place in such an opulent setting, but he reminded himself of his purpose. Finally, he was brought before the king and queen. They sat on their thrones, their faces etched with worry and fatigue. They had seen countless healers, spiritualists, and wise men come and go, each one leaving them with more despair than hope. King Efetobor looked at Odibo, noting his simple appearance. "Who are you, and what brings you to my palace?" the king asked, his voice weary. Odibo bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I am Odibo, a herbalist from a small village on the outskirts of your kingdom. I have heard of the princess's plight, and I have come to offer what help I can. I do not claim to have the power to break curses, but I believe I can help ease her suffering." The queen, though tired and skeptical, was touched by the humility in Odibo's voice. "What makes you think you can succeed where so many others have failed?" she asked gently. Odibo met her gaze, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I do not know if I will succeed, Your Majesty, but I know the power of the earth, the strength of the plants that grow in it. I have seen how they can heal wounds, soothe pain, and calm troubled minds. I believe that if the princess can find peace within herself, it may weaken the curse." The king and queen exchanged a glance. They had tried everything else. Perhaps this humble herbalist had something to offer that the others did not. "Very well," the king said after a moment. "You may see the princess, but be warned, many before you have tried and failed. If you can offer her any comfort, it will be more than we have hoped for." Odibo nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was led to the princess's chambers, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had never seen the princess before, only heard stories of her beauty and her curse. When the door to her chambers opened, Odibo was struck by the sight of the young woman sitting by the window. Her long hair cascaded down her back, and her posture was one of quiet dignity, despite the sadness in her eyes. The scent of the curse hung in the air, but Odibo did not flinch. He approached her slowly, his heart aching for the loneliness he could see in her. "Princess Amara," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "My name is Odibo. I have come to help you, if you will allow me." Amara turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and skepticism. She had seen so many healers and spiritualists, each one promising to break the curse, only to leave her more isolated than before. But there was something different about this man, something in his voice that made her want to believe. "How can you help me?" Amara asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and despair. "No one else has been able to break the curse." Odibo smiled gently, his eyes kind. "I do not seek to break the curse, princess. I seek to help you live with it, to find peace within yourself. I believe that the curse feeds on your emotions, your fear and despair. If we can calm your mind and soothe your spirit, perhaps the curse will lose its power over you." Amara listened, her heart stirring with a glimmer of hope. No one had spoken to her like this before, No one had suggested that the curse could be something she could control. It was a thought that both frightened and intrigued her. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Odibo reached into his satchel and pulled out a small jar of ointment. "This is a blend of herbs that I have prepared. It is meant to calm the mind and ease the spirit. Use it whenever you feel overwhelmed. But more than that, I will teach you how to find peace within yourself, how to focus on the positive emotions that can weaken the curse." Amara took the jar from him, her fingers brushing against his. There was a warmth in his touch, a kindness that she had not felt in a long time. For the first time in years, she felt a connection with someone, a connection that went beyond the curse that had defined her life. "Thank you, Odibo," Amara said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I do not know if this will work, but I am willing to try." Odibo smiled, his heart lifting with hope. "We will try together, Princess, and no matter what happens, know that you are not alone in this." In the days that followed, Odibo became a regular presence in the palace. He would arrive early in the morning, his satchel filled with herbs, and spend the day working with Amara. They would sit together in the palace gardens, where the scent of flowers mingled with the scent of the curse, creating an atmosphere that was both soothing and strange. Odibo taught Amara about the different herbs and their properties, showing her how to prepare remedies and ointments that could help calm her mind and body. They spent hours grinding leaves, mixing oils, and brewing teas, the simple act of creation bringing a sense of purpose to Amara's days. As they worked together, a bond began to form between them. Odibo's gentle nature and quiet wisdom slowly broke through the walls Amara had built around her heart. She found herself looking forward to their time together, cherishing the moments of peace and companionship that Odibo brought into her life. The scent of the curse still lingered, but Odibo never recoiled from it. He treated Amara with the same kindness and respect as he would anyone else. And for the first time in her life, Amara felt truly seen, not as a cursed princess, but as a person. Their conversations often wandered beyond the herbs and remedies. They talked about the world outside the palace, the villages, the forests, and the rivers that Odibo had traveled through in his life. Amara, who had spent most of her life within the palace walls, listened with fascination as Odibo described the places he had seen and the people he had met. "Tell me more about your village," Amara said one afternoon as they sat by the lily pond. "What is it like to live there?" Odibo smiled, his eyes lighting up at the memory of his home. "It is a simple place, Princess. The people are kind, and life moves at a slower pace. We wake with the sun, tend to our gardens and animals, and gather in the evenings to share stories and meals. There is a sense of community, of knowing that you are part of something larger than yourself." Amara sighed, longing evident in her voice. "I wish I could see it for myself. I have spent my whole life in this palace, surrounded by walls and gates. Sometimes I feel like a bird trapped in a cage, unable to spread its wings." Odibo looked at her with understanding. "Perhaps one day you will see it, Princess. The world outside is full of beauty and wonder, but it is also a place of challenges. You must be strong to face it." Amara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I feel stronger with you here, Odibo. You have given me hope when I thought all hope was lost." Odibo felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He had never sought recognition or praise, but knowing that he had made a difference in Amara's life filled him with a quiet pride. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between Amara and Odibo deepened. They became not just teacher and student, but friends, two souls who had found solace in each other's company. Odibo admired Amara's strength, her determination to fight the curse that had defined her life for so long. and Amara found comfort in Odibo's steady presence, his unwavering support, giving her the courage to face each day. But as their bond grew, so did the feelings that Amara had long kept buried. She found herself thinking of Odibo even when he was not around, longing for his company, his smile, his touch. She cherished the moments when their hands brushed against each other as they worked, the warmth of his skin sending a shiver down her spine. She knew that her feelings for Odibo were more than just friendship, but she was afraid to acknowledge them. How could she hope for love when the curse still clung to her, a constant reminder of her isolation? And even if Odibo did care for her, how could she burden him with a life defined by the curse? One evening, as they sat together in the garden, watching the sun set over the palace walls, Amara found herself unable to keep her feelings hidden any longer. The scent of the curse was faint, almost imperceptible in the cool evening air, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life free of its burden. "Odibo," she began hesitantly, "do you ever think about love?" Odibo turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Love is a powerful force, princess. It can heal wounds that no medicine can touch, and it can give us the strength to face even the greatest challenges." Amara's heart raced as she listened to his words. But what if love is not enough? What if the challenges are too great? Odibo smiled gently, reaching out to take her hand. "Love is never easy, Amara. It requires patience, understanding, and sacrifice. But if it is true, if it is pure, it can overcome anything." Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek as she squeezed his hand. "Do you think that love could ever overcome this curse?" Odibo's eyes softened, and he gently wiped the tear from her face. "I believe that love can overcome anything, princess, even this curse." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging in the air. Amara wanted to tell him how much he meant to her, how his presence had brought light back into her life. But the fear of rejection, of losing the one person who had shown her kindness, held her back. Instead, she leaned into his embrace, closing her eyes as she rested her head on his shoulder. Odibo wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they watched the last rays of the sun disappear beyond the horizon. In that moment, they both knew that their bond had deepened into something more than friendship. It was a bond born of shared struggles, of quiet moments, and of the hope that love could indeed break the curse that had held Amara captive for so long. But as the night descended upon the palace, both Amara and Odibo knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The curse still loomed over them, a shadow that threatened to take away the happiness they had found in each other. And they would soon discover that there were forces at play that would test their love in ways they could never have imagined. As the months passed, rumors of Amara's growing bond with the herbalist began to spread throughout the palace and the kingdom. The servants, who had once pitied the princess, now spoke of her with a mixture of curiosity and hope. Could it be that the humble herbalist would be the one to break the curse? But as people whispered of the budding relationship, there were those in the palace who viewed it with suspicion and disdain. Among them was Chief Ogaga, the king's most trusted advisor. Ogaga was a man driven by power and ambition, and he had long dreamed of arranging a marriage for the princess that would strengthen the kingdom's alliances and increase his own influence. When Ogaga heard of Amara's growing closeness to Odibo, he was furious. How could the king and queen allow their daughter to associate with a common herbalist? To Ogaga, it was an insult to the royal family and a threat to the kingdom's stability.